Welcome to the Music Journal podcast, where we talk about the hottest things happening in music right now, and also how you can apply it if you're an aspiring producer or musician yourself. I'm your host, Wes Yee. I'm a producer, artist, and educator, and I'm stoked to be chatting with you. Let's make history. All right, welcome to another episode of the Music Journal. Today we have a very special guest. Her name is Carla Nelson. I don't really say this about a lot of people, but Carla is hands down just the strongest person I've ever met in my entire life. It's funny because we kind of started our friendship behind a microphone. The first hip hop song that I ever wrote just as an artist under my own name was a co-write with Carla, which unfortunately never made it out because of my own insecurities at the time. Obviously things have changed since then, but yeah, it's totally cool to kind of be behind the mic once again with Carla. I know it's going to be very natural for her. She's an amazing singer, an amazing artist, and unfortunately she had a tragedy strike recently. She was diagnosed with stage 4 lung cancer, which is pretty difficult for me to kind of say and even think about, just knowing her and having known her for so long. But she's a fucking warrior, and it's really cool to have her here and share that story and talk about it. Carla, thanks for being on the podcast.
Thanks for inviting me. I didn't even know that it was like due to the insecurities that the song never came out, because I think the song was about insecurities.
Oh, it totally
was, right? So that would have actually been perfect.
Well, it only makes sense because that's how I was feeling at the time. So that's why the song ended up being about that. Yeah, absolutely. Carla, I totally want to just kind of take a back seat, I think, for this episode and just kind of let you share your story. I think in terms of like philosophies and stuff like that, you really have a lot of experience that kind of have shaped your views. And I know just from hanging out with you all day today, I've learned just a shit ton. And kind of hearing your perspective on things like life and just everything in general is really amazing to me. And I feel really fortunate to have been able to spend that time with you. Yeah,
we had an amazing day with like iced coffee, burritos, quesadillas, and then like sprinkled some philosophies about, life and death in there.
Those are some of my favorite things in the world, by the way.
Same. That's what probably bonded it. It was like, how to speak truths is no better way than with, classic Mexican food.
Yeah. Bingo. Yeah. I want to just shut the fuck up for a little bit. Okay. Do you mind just telling the listeners a little bit about your story? You've got a really crazy one. Feel free to start wherever you want and end wherever you want.
Okay. Well, I guess we'll kind of, do the highlights of it. So as Wes mentioned, like we met at school a few years back at Berklee College of Music, and close to my, I guess, 7th semester, I was home for Christmas, and I had been dealing with some insane back pain and like coughs, and I gave in, went to the doctor, and literally within 3 days, my life kind of went like in 180 on me. And I had this intense diagnosis, and the initial prognosis was stage 4 lung cancer, typically 6 to 9 weeks. And that's a huge piece of information to, swallow. I was 22 years old and just had everything kind of flipped on me. And actually, I guess the best way to describe it is if you're like reading a book and you finish a chapter and then you start the next chapter and suddenly all of the characters change, the entire storyline changes, and you're like, am I still reading the same book? Like, wow. My life just did not feel the same way. And that was kind of like the initial feeling, which was then immediately followed by this insane like fighter instinct that just got turned on. And I think I do strive best when everything is against me. I've noticed this trend because the doctors and even the cancer itself, nothing about it was positive. Like, of the lung cancer that I had one of these rare mutations where there wasn't even like a real treatment option for me. The doctors were not positive at all. And so a lot of things were downhill, but that kind of encouraged me to kind of create my own reality as to how this was going to end up. And I became like the most like I guess, strong version of myself. It just like everything clicked into place. And so now, like, fast forward a year and a half later, I've been through 4 chemotherapies, 7 operations. Basically traveling back and forth between Germany and America for this new trial that I'm on. And like, I kind of managed to live up to that reality that I initially wanted for myself, which was, the wish wasn't let me be healthy, it was let me be happy. And I think a lot of people, like, they think those are conditions of each other. Like, you can only be happy if you have your health.
Interesting.
And now I'd like to tell you all that, like, yes, health is something we take for granted, especially when we're very young. But it is not a condition for your happiness necessarily. And I've managed to put myself into a place where I have all my conditions for my happiness fulfilled. So I feel good with me. I feel good with the people in my life. I'm doing what I love to do. And that's really the pyramid, you know? Yeah. So like, be good to yourself, be good to others, do what you love to do.
I think it's really incredible and really powerful that you have been able to find happiness despite your health situation. It's such a classic like bad thing happening to a good person, you know what I mean? And the whole thing is like, people want to believe that if you're a good person, you know, you're immune to whatever, but it's really not the case. And what I thought initially before we even met up today that was so amazing is when we were talking on Instagram, you said something. It was something along the lines of I want to show people that it's not as bad as people think it is. Because when you said that, first of all, it made me think of everything that I've ever fucking complained about, and all of a sudden I was like, you know what, none of that stuff was really that bad if I really like go back to it and really think about it. I mean, compared to what you're going through, obviously it's really trivial. At what point do you think you were able to kind of realize that? Because I assume, I guess, like right when you got the diagnosis and you found out, I can't imagine that you were okay with it. Obviously it took some time to process. What at what point did you kind of just realize, like, okay, I can be sick? And it still feels weird for me to say that even, which is totally crazy, just because we've been hanging out all day, and I feel like throughout the whole day I've been like I've just been forgetting.
That's good.
It's just like, that's good. We're catching up, like we haven't seen each other in a while, but
yeah, that makes me so happy that you say that, because it's I don't want to like deny the fact that I am sick. That is a part of my story, and I'm very aware of it, but it is also not my identity as a person. And I think I'm lucky in the sense that I had so many very strong personality traits that had crystallized over like me growing up, that it was easy for me to hang on to other things. Like, this is not the most prominent thing about me. It is a part of my existence, but if I have to describe myself to a person, the fact that I have cancer is like not the initial thing about me that sticks out. No. And so that is actually really nice to hear, that you kind of just forget while hanging out, because believe me, it is still a reality that I live in. And so it's nice to just be more than that to other people.
I love that you have kind of separated your identity from like what you're dealing with, because obviously it's such a prominent part of your life, and you're traveling a lot. Like, I don't see you as often as I used to, obviously, because well, actually, I guess I am kind of seeing you because you come to Boston.
Well, now we can totally like hang out more often, because I'm definitely here for this trial that's only happening at this hospital, and I can only get the treatment here. So I'll be in town. Basically.
I think your whole story is insane. Do you mind sharing some of the stuff that happened to you previously? Because I feel like a lot of that stuff has really just kind of added up to your strength and your ability to kind of think about the situation you're in positively. just because you've been through, like you told me this crazy story in the car today about a producer that you used to work with, if you don't mind.
Oh, yeah.
I know you already said it, but if you don't mind saying it one more time.
Yeah, so I guess what kind of circles into that is that out of every negative experience that you go through, you can, obviously, the oldest saying in the book, you know, depends on perspective, right? So like any hardship that we go through, you kind of have the choice to control what it does to you. That there being, of course, no excuse for people treating each other badly, but
Right.
When I started school, I had some initial bad experiences with like men in the music field. They were, you know, producers or people who had higher positions than I did. And this was very new to me because I had never had the feeling that I had to prove my worth as a musician or a singer or like my value in the musical field. And so suddenly I was being confronted with people using their their position and also the fact that they were dominant men to kind of control how I was supposed to act within this actually professional setting. So that was a huge struggle, and it happened, you know, several times where I was being undermined because of the fact that I was, you know, a female or a singer or like a backup singer. So it's something that was kind of easily, you know, used as a pawn. And what it did was, yes, of course, I did have some moments where I had to like seriously kind of reflect on the situation. Like, why are people treating me like this? How is this fair as a female? Or like, how can people listen to me if they won't let me use my voice? That kind of, these questions. And what it ended up doing was that I kind of did the math. I was like, okay, there's these male producers who are trying to like use me to their advantage and undermining me and not taking me seriously. And, you know, it bleeding to like sexual harassment. Why don't I just learn what they're giving me, which is the production aspect, and then I no longer rely on that person in the equation. So that was kind of my, I guess, what helped me win in this situation was like, okay, you put me down. Well, I'm just going to cancel you out now. Like I have no need for your for your person and for your talent or what you bring to the table, because I can bring that myself now.
Right.
And so I encourage that actually, like, for women in not just the music field, in any business field, if they're feeling like they're not being taken seriously or being treated badly, think about like, what is this person giving you? And is there any way that you can give that to yourself?
I love that. And just to kind of paraphrase what actually happened, this guy, he was the producer and you were the background singer of the group, and he basically forced himself or pressured himself into your room in your first semester and totally like classic, like take advantage of this person who is essentially powerless in your situation. And he just kind of asserted himself.
Yeah, crossed the lines, especially since it was a professional, situation where I was hired as a background singer.
But you got blamed for it, which is like the whole trip to me.
Yeah, of course. So it's especially since it was a very new, like I just moved to the States, new school, new people, new faces, new dynamics. I hadn't had this kind of a dynamic back home in Germany yet. Not saying that this is a like particular like problem for the American music business field. That happens everywhere, I'm assuming, but it is definitely my like me being so new to the situation didn't help the fact that I then also didn't know who to talk to about it.
Yeah.
And also this person being technically in a higher position than I was, also being taken more seriously. There's so much that plays a role into it, but
it sounds really just isolating and kind of scary.
It was isolating, it was scary, but I think it became more isolating and scary once I started expecting this kind of behavior. Because what saved me in the beginning was that I didn't expect this kind of behavior. I was so certain.
Well, it still sucks that you have to be aware of it and
Totally.
kind of almost like you said, expect it to happen. And then with that, it's like when you're they say when you're driving, the safest way to drive is to assume that everybody else is going to make a mistake. But that's not a good way to do that, right? Like you want to be able to think that you follow the rules and everybody else also follows the rules and everything works out. But
yeah, so we don't want we shouldn't be living in a world where the people doing things right are considered naive or even stupid, like you should have known kind of mentality. And I didn't know better, and I didn't know how to communicate this kind of a problem. And so I guess I had to find new tools. And even so, I guess my communication skills in this weren't ideal. And I also didn't feel like I had the support system in place yet. So I created my own support system, which in this case was, okay, learn how to do production yourself.
Yeah, and that's amazing.
So, and, you know, that goes then in a lot of different fields. So, like, the same with the cancer. So, like, in the beginning, when I was first diagnosed, I had less than a third of my lung capacity.
Jesus.
So, like, speaking was very hard. Singing was out of the question. And I'm a singer, so it felt like my emotional, like, coping mechanisms that, you know, as singers, we put our emotions into our songs, our singing was no longer there. So I can't remember who said it, but it was like, strength is directly correlated to your amount to adapt, how much you can adapt to a situation.
I like that. Yeah.
So it's like, in that moment, I had to adapt. So I couldn't sing very well. So what do? I find a new outlet for me to, like, express my feelings. And also, I managed to then, like, translate that musically. So when I was in the hospital, I'd have my laptop out and all my, like, my MIDI keyboards and like would make my beats, and they were very electronic based. The little bits that I could sing were heavily auto-tuned because it was just a wisp of air, and that became like an artistic choice. So like beautiful. I take back what was out of my control in that situation, which has been my surviving skill, you know, as long as I can remember. So
it kind of reminds me of the very first thing we started talking about when I hit that record button was like back then when we made our song and it was about like insecurities or whatever, and I was too insecure to even put it out. As people grow, especially for me, like as I've grown as an artist, my sound changes with the way that I grow as a person totally, and just in life in general. So, you know, if you have something really drastic happen to you, like situationally, of course the music is also going to drastically change. So it makes total sense, and it's really cool that you've been able to make that work. I think that's really difficult, especially because if you are a singer, like it's such an emotional, like I always say that the voice is a really unique instrument because it transcends what any other instrument can do, because now you're adding the whole language factor. So in addition to having the notes that can resonate with people, you can now actually speak to them on a different level in like a way that people just communicate every single day. So to not be able to convey the emotion that you want to convey, I'm sure is really hard, because you must be feeling so many emotions at the same time about the fact that it's not the same as it was before, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. And also, I guess maybe a lot of you can relate to this kind of feeling, but when there's such a drastic change or such a hard, I guess, diagnosis that you're dealing with, sometimes there's so much emotion in the room taking up the space that you might need to express your feelings. So there was so much like chaos and, I guess, you know, panic within my circles, that once again, the way I react to things is like I have to balance it out. So to negativity, I balance that with positivity. To like emotional overload, I become more passive and also more introverted. And that I'm not always sure how helpful that is, but it definitely is a phenomenon I think that happens to maybe more people than they know. Is like you need to allow yourself to have the space to actually feel what you're feeling.
You said something really interesting to me in Panera Bread, kind of about that too. Could you reiterate it about the whole, like, after the chemotherapy sessions, like coming home and having like your younger persona kind of in your
oh
psyche?
yeah, right. Okay, yeah. So that's a coping mechanism, I believe, called like the inner child, that I've heard other people also describe to me, where you basically see yourself as the child that you once were, and you kind of treat yourself and say the things that you needed to hear as a child. And it seems to always come back to the day of chemotherapy. Whenever I get back, when I leave the hospital, I just kind of, I don't want to say that it's that I go back to my childish ways, because it's actually a very like forward thinking thing to do. But I definitely go back into like the cocoon of a child that needs to let out all the feelings that exist without judging them or like trying to place them in any kind of like psychological way. You just let the feelings exist. And that's kind of like my outlet. I become the 8-year-old me, and allow myself also to be negative and upset and angry at the situation.
Yeah.
But then once I do that, there's no longer the need to spread it out throughout the rest of my days, because I've allowed myself to feel that way.
Right. And you kind of grow an acceptance for it. I feel like, this is like kind of common knowledge, but whatever has happened to anybody as a kid is going to shape how they become as an adult. Like, okay, so I haven't really shared this with a lot of people, to be honest, and I can't believe I'm doing it like right now on this podcast, but my father comes from really traditional backgrounds and roots. So his father would like beat him when he was younger, and then he did that to me till I was about 15 years old, and my high school got involved and stuff like that, and it was like this whole thing, and then he stopped doing it. But that's something that I was affected by up until more recently than I'd probably like to admit. But I kind of went through the same kind of meditation ritual. It wasn't the exact same, obviously, but it's something that I kind of had to nurture within my own psyche and my brain, and then kind of come to acceptance with it and realize that I'm doing these things because of this that has happened to me, and that's okay. And then from doing that, it makes it better, because then you're not bottling up the emotion, you're kind of allowing it to just exist, and you're putting it out into the world. And I think it's something that really like anybody should be doing, because everybody has problems, right?
Oh yeah,
everybody. We were talking about this too, because we were saying that it doesn't matter like what you've been through. It's all kind of relative. I mean, there's a line obviously where you're probably complaining too much if you're complaining about stuff that really is so trivial that it doesn't matter. But at the end of the day, it's somewhat relative. So like the worst thing that's ever happened to somebody is gonna feel like the worst thing, you know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely.
Even though like as you were saying at Panera Bread, there's always someone who has it worse.
Right.
What's a way that you were able to kind of I guess shift that mindset as the problems got worse? Because obviously right now you're dealing with probably the most traumatic thing you've ever dealt with, I'm assuming, right?
Yeah, that's story for another podcast.
What was the way though that you were able to finally kind of like shift your mindset and come to acceptance with it? Because obviously in the beginning it was really difficult, and then because the worst thing that happened to that point was the worst thing, but now this is the new worst thing. So how are you able to
yeah, that's an interesting one, because I guess what I would describe it as is coming to the conclusion, and this kind of, is what I mentioned earlier, that your happiness is defined by you and not through these outside influences. And yes, my happiness was tested. My inner self was tested with this crazy change in my life. But once I started doing things again that I recognized, or like taking back things that were mine, my voice, my independence, you know, my like artistic outlets, all this stuff started coming back to me, and I was still sick. And so it proved to me that like, this is a situation that I'm in, but it's not going to be my main story. You know, this is not the lead storyline of my existence. And I gotta say, I remember you mentioned this in one of your podcasts about mental health when you said that nothing is permanent. And that's literally it. Like, nothing is permanent. So the happy moments, the sad moments, the heartbreak, you know, the love, cherish them when they happen, because it's a cycle, you know, and everything comes and goes, and that takes off the pressure to have to like hold on to something, because it will be back.
Right.
And so I never take that into account when people are like, you know, you will never do this again, or you will never feel this way again. That is, those are limits that I'm not going to set myself, and that no one else should set for anyone else. Like, you are your limit. So that's just kind of what I decided to do for myself, is to like allow the bad days, allow the worst days, and then they will end, and then things will be better. And they always have turned out better in the end.
I love it. Really quick, do you want to share some of the things that doctors told you you'd never be able to do, but I've literally seen you do today?
Oh yes, the list. Yeah. So I mean, we had definitely the talk about, you know, never being able to live independently anymore, and I kind of fought my way from living in a hospital room to being able to leave the hospital room, to moving back into my parents, to now having my own place in Berlin. So that one got disproved. And then people were saying that I'd probably be hooked up to a breathing device because my breathing wouldn't improve. I walk around without a oxygen machine, which is fantastic. I think after the first new chemo that I started, I think probably like a week after the infusion, I went dancing at some trash bar with my friends.
Sick.
Like this was a week after I hadn't been able to climb up the stairs on my own.
Wow.
Like
Holy
people
shit.
were carrying me up and down. I spent a month in a wheelchair. They said I wasn't going to be able to move on my own. I'm moving on my own. I travel across the Atlantic on my own. So it's, so also when one of the hardest ones was, you will always have cancer, because the cancer that I have is, a mutation that's so aggressive that, even if you kill the cells that have the mutation, that like triggers them to, split quickly, because that's what cancer does. It will just grow back. So I went through 8 months of chemo last year, took 1 month break, and then in that 1 month, it grew back everything that had been destroyed with that 8 months of chemo, of that 8 months of fighting. Everything had returned within a month of not having treatment. And that was probably one of the bigger, you know, setbacks that I had, was realizing that I'm putting in so much work to stay alive. I'm letting this medicine, you know, which has a ton of side effects that aren't pretty, I'm allowing this to happen, and it can just all come back so fast. And so my doctor that I had in Germany, you know, was very clear about that he didn't even see most likely. He said, I'll always have cancer. But even that, even though there are a lot of facts that do prove that, I don't allow that to be my only reality option, because now I'm also on this new trial. So there's new medicine. Yeah. And medicine and research is not a linear thing. It's exponential. So like you unlock one code and you find 10 new things. So that's kind of my peace of mind to help me sleep at night, is to remember that this is like a battle of persistence. How long can I stay alive in order for something new to be there to help me stay alive?
It's a really fucked up thing and a really fucked up situation, and there's really no two ways about it. But I usually when something bad happens to someone, I'm always like immediately like, knowing that it's not going to do anything, I'm always like, I'm so sorry that's happening to you. But I mean, for you, like, you were told you were never going to fucking walk, and we've been walking around all day. So I know that if there's anybody in the entire world who is told that they're always going to have cancer, if there's anyone in the world who is going to eventually not having had it, it's definitely you. So I definitely have to commend you for that.
Thanks. Yeah.
That's so fucking crazy to me. And I didn't know that last part either till right now when you just told me.
Yeah, it's, these are, you never know how strong you'll be until you're put in that situation. So a lot of people have said things like, oh, I could never, or if I were in your position, and I do know that when you're not in the situation, that this all sounds insane and hard to wrap your mind around, but I am certain that every single one of us is actually stronger than we think. It's just that we are not put in that situation where we have to prove it.
Right. It's like working out. Like you build muscle by repeatedly lifting things that are heavy and meant to weigh you down, right? And it's kind of the same thing. Like you build mental strength by going through things that are designed to fucking weigh you down. And it's not until you do enough of that you become really mentally strong and powerful. So I think it's so fucking amazing that you have so much mental strength and prowess. Unfortunately, it's like kind of almost our time. We could talk about this literally all day.
Oh yeah,
but,
which we have, by the way.
We have, and it's been so dope catching up with you too. I do ask one question on every show except for the mental health one, obviously, because that was a solo episode. I think your answer to it is going to be, I think it's going to be definitely a unique one. So I'm so curious what you're going to say. But if you had unlimited money, no strings attached right now, what would you do and why?
Oh, well, no strings attached.
No strings attached.
Well, the thing is, I'm doing everything that I like to do without having the money for it. So I guess one thing that is a constant struggle in my existence is to see how much it stresses out the people I love around me. So if I could have unlimited money to at least make all the extra baggage lighter for my parents, my siblings, traveling back and forth, taking off the stress of health insurance, for example. I know that, we say like money doesn't really define your happiness, but it does play a huge role in the stress factor. And believe me, being sick, having to deal with the extra added stress of finances, like that is one of the bigger challenges for me, is to fight my way through the bureaucracy of being sick. And so if I had all any unlimited funds, I would take out all of that, because that's something I can control then.
Right.
The stress of my disease on my loved ones. So that would definitely be that. And of course, then I could travel back and forth between Berlin and Boston with no problem whatsoever, because that's what I've been doing lately, and it's kind of insane, but you do what you do when you're trying to be happy. Yeah. So that's definitely my realist answer, probably.
That's pretty much exactly. I didn't expect anything, but that's just knowing you and knowing how selfless of a person you are. That's totally not surprising to me. I mean,
when they're less stressed, I'm less stressed as well. So it's not super selfless, but you're in this together, right?
Right.
For at least I hope that for other people who are sick, that you have a support system.
Of course.
And you kind of are on this. Everyone plays a different role in it, but
and you're kind of realizing who's really in your corner. I'm sure.
Totally, yeah. So if I can make that, if I can contribute that that would be amazing, because then I'm playing my part, because I'm fine. Like I'm okay. I'm doing fine. But, my family, they need some extra help.
Touche. That's so fucking amazing. I wish I had a word better than fucking amazing. I feel like I've said it so many times just because I don't think a word exists for what I really think about what you're doing and how you're dealing with everything. So yeah, that's fucking incredible. Do you want to tell the listeners a little bit about your vlog and your Instagram that I know is pretty successful?
Yeah, so you can follow my story on my Instagram page, which is Beats in Bed. And there basically you can find my music and also a link to my vlog, which is called Flowers in My Lungs. And there, I take you basically through the day-to-day of being a musician, artist, cancer patient, world traveler, all at once. And I also just recently started another Instagram page for people who've been wanting to buy my art, which is Flowers in My Lungs. And there all the art that I've made during chemo, during my travels, during the, bad days where, walking was not an option, singing wasn't an option. It's just a whole story basically that I've managed to visualize. And if you want to, contribute to that, or even just be a supporter from afar, I guess, you can look that up.
It's really amazing work. It's really fucking incredible. I would absolutely suggest you check it out. And Carla, thank you so much for being on The Music Journal.
Oh, thank you so much, Wes.
Thank you for tuning in to this episode of The Music Journal. I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope you got a lot out of it. If you want to know more about me and what I do, I just put out a personal EP on Spotify. You can go to bit.ly/Wes Yee Spotify. And if you want to know more about music production, I teach an online course about it too. Just shoot an email to wes@homestudiohits.com and I'll send you an application. Just for filling out the application, I'll send you a free sample pack of sounds I use to make the instrumental you're listening to, and more. All these links will be available in the show notes, so you can check them out there. And while you're there, if you feel inclined to rate this show 5 stars, that would really help me out. Other than that, make sure you subscribe so you don't miss an episode. Thanks again. Peace.